that's a good rubric, right? What's the worst that can happen has guided a lot of the decisions in my life. Where, see, if the worst that can happen is they're gonna say no, it's okay, right? Like it's nothing bad in that. My decision is to ask. So looking back, it's one of the most, it was one of the stupidest decisions I've ever made, which paid off big time.
How on earth did I miss this? Why you were
Yeah,
consulting, and that too human consulting and like other normal consulting, and this. I was like, what is it that you've not done?
And I think my gut is trained in a way that when I look at something, I can instantly figure out if it is going to have an impact. If there is no impact, then it's just a matter of should I do it or not. So yeah, my kind of biggest lesson there, especially in context of let's say B2B SaaS or marketing, is that hey, most of what you do is going to be reversible. So a learning for me was that if you want to pursue things that you want to do in your life, you need to have the financial kind of freedom to do that. And the way that you get that is by having multiple sources.
Welcome to the show, Sanjeev. I'm so excited to have you here. Been waiting very long to have this conversation. It took a while, but here we are.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Mita. And yeah, it took a while, but I really liked your approach of just getting thorough and like doing your research. So I thought, okay, if you're doing this, you want to do this right. So I didn't want to rush you. So yeah, I'm glad it took a while, but then I'm also glad that we're here.
So nice to hear that. It gladdens my heart. It takes a little bit of time to get each episode like ready, but as long as I'm doing justice to your stories, I think it makes the whole thing worth it, and the audience also gets to listen to very quality stuff. So yeah, okay. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start with your early life education, and you've done some pretty amazing things right from the time that you started your engineering career. So yeah, let's start from there.
All right. So I grew up in Chennai, so that's where I'm from, and that's where I am right now. So I've been in Chennai for a lot, for a huge portion of my life. So like any sort of impactful place in my career journey to start would be around, let's say, third year in my college, where I started volunteering this organization called Make a Difference. So I almost go back to that as a pivotal moment in my whole journey, where Mad introduced me to a lot of the office things that I wasn't obviously aware of because I was still in college. Simple things like how to run meetings and how do you plan a project and how do you move towards achieving a goal and how do you communicate that, how do you create presentations, how do you write emails and stuff like that. So because of that, I was able to kind of get a head start when I started my career as a customer support rep in Capgemini. So that is kind of like one moment which always brings back. Actually, you know what? Before that, another kind of pivotal moment in my life was that I got access to a computer very early on. So my brother is 11 years older than me. So he got access to a computer when he was 20. That means that I got access to a computer and internet when I was 10. So I used to log on to Yahoo Messenger chat rooms. I used to have a lot of online friends who I was very comfortable interacting with. So growing up, I wasn't a very social kid. So I found comfort on the internet where I was able to talk to people. We shared interests Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, video games, WWE, anything that I was interested in that point. So from then, and that's how I learned how to converse in English. I wasn't obviously not a native English speaker. So I was kind of learning I was reading Harry Potter and then I used these chat rooms to practice my written English. So up to a point, I was really good at written English, where I would if I would chat with you on Yahoo Messenger, I'd be really good at it. But then if you met me outside and then try to talk to me in English, I would suck because I didn't unlock that skill yet. And then I obviously watch a lot of sitcoms and just grew that skill as well. So that was the first part. And then volunteering would make a difference. And that kind of led me, put me in a good position before I started working. And from there, the professional journey was lot easier is what I felt.
That's so interesting. Your whole story of, how you started to learn English. I think it's a very typical middle class story, right? For us, our parents didn't speak in English, and they had like nice aspirations for us, put us in best schools and everything. But that whole English speaking journey has been very interesting. I mean, it's on a related anecdote. My mother used to put on BBC and CNN news every day, early morning, so that I would learn how to, speak in English, understand. Uh, because no one spoke English at my home as well. So I completely relate to, the things that you did to actually learn English.
And it is in retrospect, and obviously those are the options in front of me as well, where you had to read newspapers, you had to watch English news channel. And again, for a
Let's not forget Gokulam.
Yeah, or Tinkle or Gokulam. But in retrospect, I did not obviously start reading Harry Potter or watch Friends to learn English. But it so happened, that subject, the whole sitcom and this book was interesting to me, and learning English was an outcome. And in fact, that's why I joined Make a Difference, right? Because at that point, they're focused on teaching English. And I related to that cause because I learned English on my own. I really want to pass on that skill. So that's why I joined MAD as well.
That makes sense. I think it was a very personal mission for you in that way. And you ended up spending quite a bit of time there as well. You started off when you were, I think, maybe in second year of college or so?
Yeah. I think third year of college towards the end. So in my final year, I was a volunteer, and then I then became a center head. So where you get responsibility of one shelter home that you manage along with your team of volunteers. So that's obviously where I started learning a little bit of team management, a little bit of logistics in terms of, so my job was to make sure that we had teachers in classrooms every weekend. So it would mean following up with people to make sure that they're coming. If they're not coming, finding substitutes, a lot of that. And after that, I ended up becoming a strategist, which is kind of close to the national level. So the MAD has a very, a proper structure. They had full-time members who were working in the office. And then you had part-timers who were strategists, where they would work with the full-timers to kind of implement a lot of what they were thinking along with the cities. So I was doing a bit of that for a while. And up until a point where I joined Freshworks, Make a Difference is kind of my primary identity, right? That's what I associated myself with. And that's what I was very proud of. Even though I had a full-time job at Capgemini, I would just go finish that, and then I would come back, do my work for MAD. I would travel to Chennai, I would travel to other cities to visit shelter homes. So until a point where I joined Freshworks, after which Freshworks became my entire life, it just kind of took over. But until that point, MAD was kind of the primary motivator for me to do anything.
All the things that you mentioned that you did at MAD, they're actually running a proper campaign sort of a thing in itself.
Yeah.
It was the whole goal is very different, but the basics remain the same. You're trying to get people to come and, perform a particular service for you.
And they're volunteers, right? So you need to have a different level of motivation. But in retrospect, it turns out that volunteers are a lot more easy to mobilize, even though they're not getting paid, because they're there because they're inherently motivated to do that. Versus someone who's getting a salary, they are there, they have to be there for the salary, but then they're not necessarily always motivated. So it's a lot harder to get them to do what you want them to do.
No, that's fair enough. that makes sense. So you worked at MAD, and you were also doing MAD when you were in your very first corporate job, which was at Capgemini, and your first role was IT support. And
yep.
So I know that you've done pretty much everything across the spectrum, and I think that's going to come out a little more clearly as we move further in the conversation. But what was it like, working in a very big company, working in IT support, and what was it that, later pushed you into Freshworks kind of a space?
Okay. So when I started my first job, it obviously had no idea what a job was, had no idea how business worked, had no idea what customer support or development, any of that was. Obviously, we had Capgemini come into our college for placements. I sat through the placements, cleared it, extremely grateful that I got the job. And after that, it was 8 months of radio silence, right? So until that time, I was trying to find a job in Chennai because I really didn't want to move. But then, I couldn't land anything, so I didn't have an option but just pack my bags and go to Hyderabad. So I was in Hyderabad for 3 months, loved the city, loved the food. Again, because of MAD, I had friends there as well. So I used to just hang out with them and just go to the shelter homes there. And 3 months later, once the training is done, I was asked to move to Bangalore along with 5 of my friends. Said that, hey, we have a job offer. I mean, we have a project in Bangalore that we want you to be part of. It's like a support project. I had no idea what that was, but we were like, you know what? It's okay. We like to stay in Hyderabad. And they were like, no, we're not asking. We just ask. We like just telling you you don't have a choice. You don't get to have a say in this. So that's kind of where I felt like, okay, when you join a job and especially at a junior level, you don't actually get to have a say in many things. Like, you don't get to have a say in where you work, in what role you do, or when you actually have to do the work. For example, my first, like after I moved to Bangalore, I realized that it is a rotational shift. Like every 2 weeks, your timings, actually every week, your timings would change. Like you would either be doing 10 to 6, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So it would just like keep changing. And I was living that life for a year and a half. But I'm glad that I started there because one, it taught me extreme discipline, right? Once you've been through that, you can kind of be through anything else. And another thing about being in customer support is that like when you reply to email matters and how you reply to it matters. Like a single mistake can cause the entire team displeasure and it will obviously reflect on you. So it's a very high stakes and high intensity environment. And that kind of prepped me for the rest of my career because even now, right, like replying to customers, even as I run Supermeme, which is my own startup, and there's no one to even question me if I don't reply to customers, but I still do it because that DNA that was kind of ingrained to me at that point. So yeah, it was a big company and I was learning a lot of new things, not in terms of technology or skills, right, but just like how things function, like how do you talk to people and how do you get work done from another team? How do you write follow-up emails? Just a bunch of those things. And also the back of my mind is also processing how a business functions and what I think to me that is always a curious part, right? Okay, I'm doing a job, but then how does that job affect the company that I'm working for? So I was able to see a lot of that early on. And it kind of led me down the path of exploring more in IT support. But then at that point, it's just about making sure that I was getting paid every month.
Makes sense. And I think IT support, I know it gets sometimes a little bit of a flack, but it's one of those jobs which is closest to the customers, which means you actually have your ear to the ground. There is no better way to learn about customer pain points, about the product, and also have developing that empathy for that customer and how do you solve their problems. I think, and it's a very foundational skill for everyone to have. And it's great that, you got to cultivate that very early on. Like MAD gave you certain amount of, very different amount of skills. With this particular role at Capgemini, the kind of ante kind of got upped. And so you were there, you were in Bangalore, you were working with your friends. Rotational shifts sound crazy, but that's a part of corporate and the part of that role in itself. So what is it that led you to Freshworks? Because I believe Freshworks was still relatively new at that point of time.
Yeah, it was still fresh desk at that point of time. So it was that early. So again, my primary trigger was to move back to Chennai. I realized that I am not making enough money to live by myself. So like the money that I was making was going up in rent and like occasional visits to Chennai. And even if I have to eat out, once in a while, it was just taking up a lot of my salary. So I realized that, okay, it doesn't make sense. Like there's no point being here beyond. And then I also had a health issue that kind of forced me back to Chennai. So I just wanted a job in Chennai. That was my only criteria. And that time, one of my friends was working in Fresh Desk. And then he was talking about this customer support role. I just heard the word support. I'm like, okay, I do support. They're looking for a support person. Let me go apply. And then I applied and then I got an interview. And then I obviously made it through the interview. I got selected as a customer support rep. And at that point, I had no idea about anything around service company or product company or SaaS, or it is all new for me, right? The only thing that I wanted was a job in Chennai, and then Fresh Desk was in Chennai. So I was like extremely happy. And they gave me a good bump in my salary as well. So I was like, okay, this is good. And at that point, I was honestly okay to even take a pay cut. That's how desperate I was for a move back to Chennai. So I was happy that I got a bump in my salary. And once I moved to Fresh Desk, and then I realized that there was a role called pre-sales, which is very adjacent to customer support. But then it was a different role. The name was very different. So I was like, I walked up with a manager then and I said, okay, looks like there's something that you're looking for, which is literally me overhearing their conversation. I'm like, I want to do that role because I've done support for 2 years. I want to try something different. And they were kind enough at that point to let me switch. So I did pre-sales for about 2 years. My job was just get on calls, demo Fresh Service, which is our IT support product at Freshworks. So just talk to a lot of IT team members, show the product to them, and answer their questions and figure out how to solve some of their technical requirements as such. And after a while, I started understanding a lot of patterns from my conversation with customers, and that's kind of how I started writing about them, tweeting about them, making presentations about them. So that's kind of my journey around pre-sales, and that was my entry into like the first step that I started taking into marketing as well.
That was extremely, I think, interesting. I think the most important fact here is you raised your hand because you found something interesting and you wanted to go try it out. I mean, there was no hesitation in thinking, okay, I don't know about this. Should I go ask? I'm hired for I'm hired to do something else. I think it's very important. It's a note to self. Always, raise your hand. If you feel like if you feel like you want to do something new, it's always better to go ask. What's the worst that can happen? You just hear or no.
That's a good rubric, right? What's the worst that can happen has guided a lot of the decisions in my life. Where, see, if the worst that can happen is they're going to say no, it's okay, right? Like it's nothing bad in that. Might as well just go ask.
Fair enough. And it's, I think it also ended up changing kind of the trajectory of your career as well, right? Right until that point, like you were in a different role. Then you started, I mean, your entire journey towards generalism started with that. Sorry, I kind of scripted that word. Generalist.
Yeah, I see the trouble is.
So, but yeah, it kind of started with that. And I also recall this very, very vividly that you mentioned that your accidental entry into marketing started through blogging and through personal branding, which started at this point of time with pre-sales.
Actually, yeah, my personal branding started way before it. Like I said, I was very comfortable spending time on the internet. So even in my school or college time, I would just post memes. I would rant about IPL matches and maybe even made some naive political comments back then, which I had no idea about politics. But I used to do all those things, which meant that I was very comfortable expressing my views on the internet. So once I started with Freshworks and once I started kind of forming opinions on my own about work and about IT support and more specifically about IT service management and IT teams, I started sharing them as blogs on the on the internet, and then I found people who would publish the blogs. I would obviously publish them internally in the Freshworks blog as well. But then I found a voice and I found opinions that I wanted to share. And because I had experience working and just sharing my opinion, it was not with the intent of doing personal branding. I was just comfortable doing that because internet is where you find people who share the same ideas, but then you don't find them until you actually share your ideas. So I started doing that. And I didn't realize how that tied into marketing. For a very long time, I maintained the fact that, hey, I want to be in pre-sales because that's where I'm getting ideas from. If you take me out of pre-sales, I will not be able to write any of these blogs because my input is cut out. So that's where it started. And beyond the point, what I did was I started applying to speak at conferences. So looking back, it was one of the stupidest decisions I've ever made, which paid off big time. Because when the conferences that I applied to, the average age of a presenter was easily 40 plus, right? They had experience over 20 years doing this thing. And there was 25-year-old with barely any experience in real world IT. But then I had a unique thing to share, I had opinions to share, and I was just driven by that. So I would apply to these conferences, and then they would pick me, and Freshworks was kind enough to sponsor my travel, and we would also sponsor the conference. I was there presenting a topic. I would interact with people. Then they would later come by our booth, and then we would have a conversation. So that happened for a while, where I was in pre-sales, and then I realized that okay, I'm doing a bunch of marketing stuff. Actually, more than me, at that point, my head of marketing realized that hey, you are doing these things, but then you're doing these things as part of pre-sales. Why don't you come over to product marketing and do it as part of your job? And we'll be able to support you better. We'll be able to get behind you. We can make this your job. So they created this role called a product evangelist. It's just a individual contributor role where my job was just go around the world, present at conferences. So I was happy doing that for a year.
See, it led to a creation of a new role.
Oh yeah. That's the thing, right? When you're really, especially in smaller orgs or startups, it doesn't matter if the role doesn't exist. You, by just doing the work, you can create a role for yourself.
Certainly true. And I think as long as you're like solving a problem that the company cares for, the whole the designation and all doesn't matter. I mean, things can be created.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, in smaller setups, there's definitely that flexibility to do that. So yeah, you were in Freshworks having the time of your life, joined in for IT support, ended up in pre-sales, then you ended up in getting into product evangelism.
Product marketing.
Yeah.
Product marketing. Yeah.
Like proper product marketing. And like,
Yeah.
so your journey into product marketing, so then it was like a very gradual, very organic sort of one. But then what were the things that, kind of things that you worked on there? And I recollect that you moved later into a very proper, very full-fledged product role. So, what led you that kind of a decision as well?
Okay. So within product marketing, I think the initial role that I joined, like I said, was the product evangelist role, which is basically an extension of what I was already doing. My job was to just get a lot of opinions and perspectives out representing Freshworks. But after that, what started happening was there's a reorg, and then marketing teams go through reorg all the time. So that happened. So there was a reorg, and then the product marketing team kind of split. So we were starting to work very closely with product, and because I had a background in pre-sales, I was able to bridge that gap. So what was happening is product was shipping features, and then customers didn't know about it. Like the sales team didn't know about it. There's a lot of gaps in internal kind of communication. There's a lot of gaps with our, let's say, our solution articles and our website saying something and the product like saying something else. And because I was in a unique position where I understood the product deep down, because I was like, when I was on pre-sales, I was kind of the go-to person on the technical side as well. And I was also able to communicate that in marketing. So I started being the bridge. So one of the primary problems I solved at that point is just bridging the gap between product and marketing, where I would come up with processes to sync product marketing into the product management process, where, okay, when a feature is getting built is when product marketers get plugged in. So they can start ideating in parallel about how they can talk about that feature, how can they write the website, how can they write the solution article. So that way, they're kind of moving in sync parallelly. And that was kind of one of the things that I worked on. We also worked on getting Freshservice or the Gartner Magic Quadrant. That was a new experience. Like the Gartner Magic Quadrant is a big deal. So it was really good to work on like such an intense project where there's you had to work with CSM, you had to work with sales teams, you had to work with customer support teams across the board. And we also had our internal event. So I was responsible for about 3 versions of that, especially in the IT track, where we would source speakers from around the world, internal and external, put them together and then review the decks and give feedback and just do all of that. So bunch of things, but these are kind of the main things that I worked on. And through all this, I also ended up building a team. So I ended up building a team from when I joined, there was just 3 of us, and then I scaled the team to 10 people. So there were a lot of that as well. First time manager. So I kind of went through that, like figured out how to hire, figure out how to train, how to coach, and just go through all of that.
That's an extremely intense experience, like intense in terms of learning, intense of everything that's happening, and so much flux. But I think that's what keeps things interesting, like the whole learning curve.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, the journey into product, right? So I always wanted to be a product manager. At that time, there was not a right fit at Freshworks. So I ended up kind of sidebarring into product marketing, which makes sense because now when I actually become a product manager, I had support experience, I had sales experience, I also had marketing experience. So the product management stint happened at a startup, which was by my head of marketing at Freshworks. So he went out and started a company, and by the time I also quit. So then he said, okay, I'm starting a new company, you're also available, so why don't you just come join? And I know that you want to be a product manager, so I was grateful for that opportunity where I was the 8th member of the company. And then I joined SuperOps. So SuperOps is again in the IT support and in the IT MSP space, so managed service provider space. So with them, I was doing a bunch of different things again. So started doing demos for our early customers. We did a bunch of obviously marketing stuff. I spent about 3 months in the US where I would just lug around like a huge banner, display events, display the banner in different events. I would travel around the city, just representing SuperOps at events, talk to people. We are very early there. So the goal there is to get feedback and figure out if what we have actually is able to serve the market. So we did a bunch of that. And yeah, spent about a year and a half at SuperOps, primarily product management, but also a bit of pre-sales, also a bit of product marketing.
There is too much of super in your life, no?
Yeah, that is a segue into this next super, which happened during my time at SuperOps. So I started working on Supermeme. It's an AI meme generator. So the story of Supermeme starts like this, right? Where at some point in SuperOps, obviously my personal brand is still parallelly getting built. I started during the pandemic. I started posting videos on the internet. So I would record videos of product managers kind of being goofy in meetings and I don't know. The motivation for that is I was extremely confused with the role. I was like, you know what, I need a way to express that. So let me just do that. So the videos kind of got me some good mileage on the internet, got me connected with a lot of few people. And during that time, I also got connected with Ramshree, one of my Supermeme co-founders. He was building an AI meme generator. And I was playing around with the no-code meme search tool. And we just shared our work on LinkedIn. And we obviously saw each other and we saw that we were working on something similar. So he reached out and he said, okay, I'm working on something. Do you want to work on this together? Let's find someone else who can kind of build out the app. And there is an idea here. This was in late 2021. So right now, the whole indie hacker and the micro-SaaS scene is kind of buzzing with a lot of knowledge. So, back then, we had no idea that something like this existed, right? So it was just something we wanted to try. So Ramshree already had an app on his own. So he kind of knew how to do this. But then for his and actually Nico also had his own project. So he was making money from a boilerplate. I was new to this, but then I had experience of being in B2B SaaS, being in product management, and also just a decade of experience in creating memes. So that kind of made me a good fit. We got together, got on a WhatsApp group, and yeah, we haven't left the WhatsApp group. So we have never met each other. So it's going to be 2.5 years. So we had not met each other. Supermeme makes about $5,000 a month. So far, we've made about $100,000. Just completely remote, fully bootstrapped, and only 3 people. And yeah, we've actually not spent anything on marketing also. So it's extremely profitable.
Very, very fascinating. I think, we're getting into conversation a little early, but I think one thing is like marrying your passion with the work that you're doing. I think it's nice, no?
And making money.
Yeah, I think it's nice. So all those that decade of, making memes, entertaining people, it's coming to fruition right now. So I think that's really great. A couple of questions here. You started with the whole micro-SaaS scene quite early before it became like a scene per se. So tell us a little bit more about micro-SaaS and what does it look like? And if someone is thinking of building something in that particular space, what does it take? I know this is a little different in terms of conversation, but I think we should still talk about it.
No, definitely. And this is something I love talking about, right? So see, micro-SaaS to me, I have a definition for it. So it's basically a SaaS product that solves a micro problem for a micro market with a micro budget and a micro team while being happy with micro growth. And I'll break that down, right? So the micro problem is a typical SaaS product goes after a big problem, like a huge market, like a CRM, customer support, marketing automation. So the micro SaaS, you pick a subset of that. For example, Supermeme.ai only solves meme generation. And there are very, very few products that solve that. And we solve it for a specific market, which is marketers. So we say, hey, we want to help non-meme creators create memes. And then if you just go deep into that, who are the non-meme creators who want to create memes? They're some sort of marketers who are trying to market what they have. So we go, and then the way that we do it is with a small team, with a micro team of 1 to 3 people max, and then mostly their equal stakeholders. And then we do it with an extremely essentials only budget where you just pay for the domain, you pay for any of the hosting, and that's pretty much it, right? So anything else that you make on top of that is profit. And then the bigger differentiation is that when you're bootstrapped and you operate in this micro SaaS mindset, it's completely fine for you to just make a few $1,000s a month, right? It is like, for example, Supermeme has been at $5,000 a month for about a year now, which is like $1,500 per person full profit, while we have our full-time job, which still generates revenue. So it's not like we are forced to constantly grow. It's not like there is any investor pressure. So I see micro SaaS as a mindset that kind of encompasses of all these different aspects that I spoke about. But at the end of the day, it is a software on the internet that then you can charge for.
I think that's the most concise way of explaining micro-SaaS and what it does. And I think one thing which, even when Muaz shared your profile with me and he was like, you should talk to him. By the way, a huge shout out to Muaz Kadri for sharing Sanjeev's profile with me. I'm going to tag him in the LinkedIn post as well. I actually told him that, I'm having this conversation with you. When we first had our pre-interview, I told him like, this is happening. Thank you so much. So you shout out to him. He keeps on giving me nice suggestions. Okay.
Yeah, +1 to what you said. So thank you so much.
But coming back to this, I think for me, what struck me was that you were doing this when you had a full-time role. Then you took like a bit of break and you were doing like consulting work. And again, so this has been something which has been integrated in your life pretty well. And it works well as a side hustle because, I mean, you've been learning while doing this, you're making money. And for me, it's very fascinating that you're doing this off a WhatsApp group, to be honest. Really? A WhatsApp group, 3 founders who have never met.
Yeah, actually, I think in a way that we intentionally trying not to beat because the story is amazing, right? Like for 2 years, we've just been saying that, hey, we've not met, but at some point we should meet. But again, see, this like Supermeme story to me personally is proof that anyone can just sit in front of a computer, build software, make money. Like an AI meme generator shouldn't exist. Like no one asked for this product. Like no one wanted this, but here it is making $100,000 by people who've never met in real life. So this kind of product will not exist if, let's say, we start thinking about this from a traditional SaaS mindset. Okay, is there a market? Is there a CAC? Is there what is the typical growth rate or the any of those things, right? So Supermeme to me is kind of the way that I've been seeing it. See, right now it brings in money. That's obviously a huge benefit. But beyond that, it is an amazing story that I get to share where I can tell people that, hey, we've done this, which means that anyone can just go build software and make money. It is about finding the right problem and building it the right way. Like even now with Supermeme, it's not that we work our hearts out, right? Like we hardly do a few hours every week and that's enough. So that's the lifestyle that a micro-SaaS product can give you where you can build something, maybe put a lot more time towards the early stage, get it out there, start making some initial revenue, grow it slowly. And then if you get it to a point where let's say makes a few $1,000s a month, you are set. Like you don't have to, like even if you don't work, it's still going to bring you that revenue. And I can vouch for this because for 4 months of my life, I did not do anything else but just get paid from Supermeme. So I know that I can survive from that.
Oh, makes sense. I think that makes sense. And by the way, I'm planning to use Supermeme next month. I've been doing some other things this month, but then I had it on my list. So all the things that I'm planning for MHM for next year, even I mentioned this earlier to you that I want to do memes, not a very funny person. So I definitely need something of this sort to help me out. So it's so I'm going to give it a try and I'll be pinging you and telling you what I think about it.
Of course. Yeah. You got it.
Yeah. Okay. But on Supermeme, I have a few more questions. So the first one is, what are some challenges, working on this side hustle along with a full-time role?
Mm-hmm.
I think you've covered that to some extent when you say that, you only spend few hours a week working on that. And how do you manage your time, to be honest? Like there's a lot going for you. So how do you manage time doing everything?
I think the biggest challenge has to be context switch, right? It is not the lack of time. It is not it's not like it has to keep you busy. The problem is, I don't think your brain is kind of wired to switch between multiple things at the same time. So the way that I try to handle it is I try to have 2 or 3 big buckets that I'm focusing on. Everything falls under that bucket. For example, for me, micro-SaaS in itself is a bucket where I try to build multiple products. I'm trying to learn how to code, and Supermeme is obviously a big part of that bucket. So that way, I'm at least not trying to context switch too much within that. But see, with the full-time job, the first challenge is context switch. The second challenge is obviously going to be perception in terms of how are you managing your time, because it is not a very common thing, especially in India, where you get to have side projects that make revenue, right? And I was also being vocal about it on the internet. So in my current role with Stitchflow, it's one of the first things that I checked before I took up the job, saying that I will continue to run Supermeme on the side, and I might even run other side projects. And Jay, my current CEO, he was like, see, as long as you get your job done, I don't care what you do. But again, I was lucky to find someone like Jay who kind of approves that, but then that's probably something to watch out for. But beyond that, see, it is going to be a few hours here and there, which I think anyone can manage to find despite even if you have a full-time job or not. And if you have a remote job, nothing like it. But just make sure that whatever you get paid for, you kind of do justice to that. And then after that, you should be fine.
Fair enough. I think, and a huge shout out to Jay as well for being so open minded. We need more bosses like these. It is true, right? I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of people will also face. Not all companies are going to have that sort of, freedom or that sort of flexibility of, having their employees juggle multiple projects. So I think that's a huge win.
I think it takes a lot of trust. So that's a key word there where
Trust.
so you can obviously never control what people do in their own time, right? But then the nature of, let's say, an internet business is that you have to put your face behind it. So you cannot just do it behind closed doors. So it's important to have your company's kind of blessings before you do anything like that. So yeah, it's just important to have that trust between you and your employer.
Fair enough. I think one question which occurs to me, so you mentioned you've not spent like a lot of, monies trying to get users for Supermeme.
We've spent zero money trying to get users. Again, one more thing that we've spent $0 trying to get users. Again, one thing I think we're just being stubborn about because it's a good story. Like at some point we should start spending money because it's just the right thing to do. See, right now, because Supermeme is a product that has virality inbuilt into it. So it's a kind of product where if you use it, you're going to tell your friends, you're going to share it on the internet, it's going to bring more people. But then we had a couple of peaks during our journey, and I think that led to where we are today, right? So the first peak was when we had our product and launch somewhere around May 2022, before ChatGPT. So May 2022 is when we did our product and launch. Ended up being product of the day, got some 3,000 signups on that day. Good bump in our MRR, but then we are hovering around less than 1,000. And then we had a dip, and that's probably the time we were debating, hey, is this the right thing? Should we build this product or something like that? And then ChatGPT came onto the scene, and along with it brought a lot of interest on AI tools, and that's when things started moving in the right direction. So we started getting mentioned in a lot of these lists, like top AI tools to watch out for, top AI tools for marketers, top 10 creative AI tools, and a lot of that. So we started getting a lot of links organically back to our website, and that boosted SEO like crazy. So even now, if we search for AI memes, we'll be on the top result, and that is the primary source of traffic for us. So the early stage, it is our personal brand that is driving the traffic, and then a little bit on product hunt, and then SEO. And right now, just SEO brings us 1,000 to 1,500 signups a day. At our peak, we were getting 3,000 to 3,500 signups a day. Right now it's dipped a little bit, but then we're all like right now the things that we're working on are very SEO focused. So we moved from a no-code website builder to a fully coded website with everything under Supermeme. So that way we can start getting a little bit more interactive on the website. Like we can embed a lot of the functionality right on the homepage, so people can just try it out. Right, they were trying a bunch of different things, but yeah, SEO has been the primary source of users for us.
Who says SEO is dead?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that SEO, I wrote a lot of these blog posts and content using AI content. So again, it's not that if you use AI content, you can't rank. But yeah, obviously take it with a pinch of salt. But I apply your own logic, but then definitely use AI because I was the only marketer for Supermeme. So I can't have a 60, 70 page website if I don't use AI. And I use that, and it is proving to be helpful.
No, it makes sense. I think I saw that meme guide on Supermeme website. It's a very detailed one. I think the one which was like that butterfly meme on the top.
Yeah, I'm not going to let AI take credit for that. So that one is me because again, it needed a little bit of thought process on how to create memes as a marketer. But again, the content is AI generated, but the structure and the topic and everything is from me. But there are some blog posts which is like entirely AI generated. So I can let ChatGPT take credit for that.
This is going as a clip when we are going to market this episode. I'm sure a lot of people will jump on this saying that, oh, AI written content, no, doesn't rank. But no.
Brings me traffic. That's all I care about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the means justify the ends.
Yeah. See, there's a page on Supermeme, which is like the third highest ranking page called Thursday Memes. That's the keyword. Amazing search volume. And obviously all the memes there are AI generated. So it is technically AI generated content, but it is like it brings a lot of traffic. So I'm saying it's about context, right? As long as the content that you have on the website meets the need, doesn't matter where it's coming from.
Great one. Like, really good one. I think one thing I realized when I was going through your LinkedIn profile today is that you were also listed as an actor for a short duration of time. Yes, like,
yes, I am.
how on earth did I miss this? And why you were consulting, and that too humor consulting and like other normal consulting and this. I'm like, what is it that you've not done? But I would love to hear about your consulting, phase of life in general, and please get into the whole actor bit of it as well. Very curious.
So that was right after I left SuperOps is when that's the first time in 9 years that I was out of a job. But then literally I had a consulting contract the next day that I left. So that way I knew that my monthly was sorted and Supermeme was generating revenue. So that was a brief period of my time where I had freedom. I had like a lot of time and I can explore a bunch of different things, right? So I was doing business humor consulting, which basically translates to you creating memes for brands and you creating videos for brands. So that is what I was masking as business humor consulting because it sounds a lot fancier. But I was doing that. I was working in brands and I was creating videos for them. And I was like, the idea behind that is humor sells better. So if you're a brand, and I understand B2B, so I was in a unique position to kind of blend B2B SaaS with humor. So I was helping a brand with a lot of that. And during that time is when I had the opportunity to work on the summer web series. So it is the web series called Where Am I Office. So it is an office-based sitcom, like a Tamil sitcom that my friend was working on, and he was a creative producer. He used to see my memes on Instagram, and he was like, "You create a lot of office content, so we have a series where we're working on office stuff. So do you want to just collaborate and maybe help with the writing?" So that's how I got him. I was trying to help with the writing, and then they were trying to find someone for this one character, and I was right there, and I said, okay, here's my audition reel. I have these videos on the internet, and then they're like, they couldn't find someone else. They're like, okay, you know what, you're playing this. I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. Let me give that a try. And I used the story to say that I was able to do this only because I had Supermeme and I had my consulting. So the freedom in the way that you work will also open up opportunities which are otherwise not open to you. Like if I had been in a full-time job and this had come up, I would not have been able to do this. So 3 months, my routine was that I would wake up, go to the shoot, spend 12 hours, 14 hours there. I would take my laptop, so I just get some work done there. But it was an extremely interesting and fun experience. I started appreciating how much goes behind in shooting one scene, like the amount of physical labor that just goes behind setting the right lights and like the camera that looked extremely heavy. And just the coordination that it took to get 30 seconds of footage on screen, right? So extremely grateful and extremely appreciative of what goes behind that. So that was an amazing experience for me. I just learned a lot and started seeing kind of films and sitcoms in a new perspective. But then also made me realize not something that I want to do. So it's definitely not something that I want to do full time. But maybe at some point, if I want to get back into a creative field where, let's say, I start producing some of these content, I at least know a little bit of what goes into making those things.
No, makes sense. I think it's also about having those very diverse experiences, right? It makes you richer as a creator. And I'm not talking about creator in the creator sense. I'm talking about someone who's doing campaigns. I'm talking about someone who's putting out ideas for the work that they do. And having such diverse experiences, right from doing your own skits. And by the way, I've seen some of those on YouTube. My God, they're hilarious. Yeah.
Thank you.
To getting to this point wherein you get the experience to actually teach companies how do they sell in a fun way, how do they make the whole process of outreach a lot more fun. using humor in, be it memes, be it funny videos, whatever it is. Let's face it, humor sells. At least there is a lot of recall value in it, which is otherwise lost when you're just going and plainly having like a chat. There's a very particular reason why we all like marketing millennials, because of the content that we see. I mean, it's the same principle applied over here as well.
Yeah.
So we've covered like so much of your life, and right now, very recently, I think a few months ago, you started like your new
Yep.
leading marketing at Stitchflow, and that's actually, I think that's when I first reached out to you, and life was very crazy for you at that.
Yeah, you're just like building a new team, so
Yes.
it is pretty hectic. But yeah,
So let's talk about your Stitchflow chapter, and I know that you're building team right now. You're hiring. I see those posts on LinkedIn. So would love to hear as to what's your approach, and what are the things that you look for when you're hiring as a marketing leader, because I'm pretty sure a lot of folks who are applying would love those sort of insights. And B, I would love to understand what's the kind of AI stack that you are using. Are you using AI at work firstly? And if yes, what is it that you've been doing?
awesome. So Stitchflow happened 3 months ago, right? Again, just like rewinding a little bit. So Jay and I met. Jay is the CEO of Stitchflow. So Jay and I met in 2016 at a conference in London. So when I was still at Freshworks, so Jay had just co-founded his previous company at Spoke, and then like he was hosting like an event for like ITSM influencers, and I was like, I was part of that network of ITSM influencers, so I was like part of that. So we met briefly, like didn't get a chat much, but then we were connected on LinkedIn. And fast forward to 2022, where he had sold his company to Okta, worked in Okta for a while, and then came out to start Stitchflow in Jan 2022. And then we connected in Jan 2023, I think. Which year are we in? 24, right? Yeah, Jan 2023. Yeah, Jan 2023 is when he started. And by the time I already done a bit of humor consulting, so I was posting a lot of videos. So around that time, he reached out and then he was like, we want to do some marketing and I really like what you're doing with videos. So can we do some videos for Stitchflow? So that's how it started. I was consulting with him for a while. And then his plan was always to move to Chennai and set up a team here because Chennai has a lot of B2B SaaS talent. And even then we were kind of discussing that as an option, but I was still consulting. So September this month, he moved and then we met and he was like, okay, we want to start a Chennai office and then we want to build a marketing team here. Are you interested? So until that point, I was actively staying away from full-time jobs. I was actively staying away from applying because I felt like I've kind of done pretty much everything. And even if I do end up getting a new job, it's somehow going to be in the same space. It somehow is going to be the same things. So I was trying to stay away. And at that point, I was actually trying to learn how to code. So I want to build my own micro-SaaS. That's what I was doing. So but then when Jay reached out, I saw two things, right? One, I saw an opportunity to build a team for myself. So the motivating factor there is Chennai, especially India, the way that in a global SaaS context, we've kind of proven to the world that we can build amazing products from India. But then what you see happening is that as the product starts scaling, you see sales and marketing getting hired in the US with some sort of, beyond a point, you cannot scale a marketing team in India. So I want to learn how to build a world-class marketing team from Chennai with the talent that we have. That's one motivation. The second motivation is that both, Jay and the team of, there's 4 co-founders for Stitchflow. All of them have experience working in the US, working with Bali companies, and they have experience there. So I really want to learn that culture. So I've only worked with Indian B2B companies. So I obviously understand a lot of what goes on here. But I always wish that I could, let's say, move to the US and work at a Valley product company for a couple of years. But then here they were they were moving to Chennai, and it just so happened that I know them and then I get to work with them. So I almost saw it as an opportunity which doesn't come often. So it just made sense. So I took it up. And we're just building a team, and we right now have about 5 people. We're growing. I think for Stitchflow, just ties in well with your second question as well, right? We almost think of AI as a differentiator. So if you, again, go back a few years, if you think of how HubSpot would think of structuring a team of content writers, so they would hire 50 people, put them in the room, and then churn out blog posts day in and day out. What we think that we can do is we can have 2 people where they just come up with really well-researched outlines, and then we can come up with like a system that effectively uses AI. It could mean a combination of different models. It could mean a fine-tuned model, whatever it is. And we can generate the same amount of content that, let's say, a team of 50 writers could generate elsewhere. So that's the approach that we're taking with AI. And again, that is one of the criteria that we are hiring. So we wanted anyone who's joining the team to be comfortable using AI tools and just be open to the mindset that, hey, AI, especially in marketing, but in other places also, AI is going to be a tool which if you don't adopt, you're going to be left behind. So we wanted people with that mindset. So we've mostly hired people around 2 to 7 years of experience, so not too experienced, so they don't bring their bias. So Chennai is amazing in terms of having that B2B SaaS talent, thanks to Zoho, Freshworks, and all the other startups that we have here. But with that, there's also a sense of, okay, this is kind of how we have done things so far. So especially with a lot more experienced folks, you find that there is that muscle memory of going back to things that used to work, which again, I have the bad habit as well. So what we are finding out is that when we get people young, they're a lot more open to trying new things. And I personally believe that the next few years in marketing is going to be very different from what we've seen, which is again what every marketer says. But then I definitely believe that, given that AI is transforming the way that we work. So we wanted people who are who will have the skills, but then they're also nimble enough, they're also open enough to adapt to new ways of working. So that's one thing that we see. But yeah, beyond that, every role has its own requirements, and it's very role based and people based. In terms of AI, I see 2 or 3 areas where Stitchflow's AI, Stitchflow's marketing is think of using AI, right? One, I was talking about the content. So we want to build an AI powered content engine that can come up with high quality content at scale, while a human, obviously a content writer, is giving it a high quality input. So that's where the human person, the input comes in. Obviously, the editing and post production. The second layer, what we want to do is we want to almost think of code as content. So what I mean is, can we build a bunch of micro-SaaS products and give it out as free tools? Again, 3 years ago is not possible, because a turnaround time to build a small tool. So when I say tool, a micro-SaaS, applying the same mindset is that for Stitchflow, can we build a contract management parser? So Stitchflow works with IT teams who deal with access gaps, who deal with license gaps. So a tool that we can build for them is, can you upload all your contracts, and then we'll give you a contract renewal calendar. And these tools used to take ages to build, but now thanks to AI, thanks to tools like Replit and Bolt, we can just do it over a weekend. We can do it over a week. So that's one lever that we're thinking. Can we not just think of content as written content or video content, but maybe even software as content? So can we think of software as content, and can we use AI to churn out software quickly? Can we build one tool a week, and can we use that as a lead magnet? So that is one area we're thinking about. And even the third area we're thinking about is, a lot of what we do can be templatized. For example, we come with case studies. So case studies, we have, for every case study, we have a huge case study, a bunch of one-pager case studies, a slide deck format, a website format. A lot of this can be templatized. So one way that we're thinking about is, can we feed all this into, let's say, a Claude project, and then literally only give it the information that we need for the other customer, and have it come up with a similar case study across all these formats. So in kind of summary, the way that we think about AI is that there's a lot of monotonous, repeatable, templatized work that marketers do that AI can come in and help with. But then the input that goes into that should still come from a human marketer. So we are almost thinking, can we leverage a little bit of that? But then one thing that we're very sure is, we are not ignoring AI. We are not looking at AI as a trend. We take it very seriously. So it's not hey, yeah, we also use AI. It's good to just tweet about it. But no, all of us have Claude subscription. All of us have ChatGPT subscription. We have a Replit subscription. So we subscribe to all these AI tools because we use it day in and day out. But yeah, I've been actually meaning to talk about it for a while. I'm glad that we asked this question. Maybe in a couple of weeks, I really want to write up some of the things that we're doing after we've published some of the stuff. So that way there's substance to that as well. So that was a extremely long answer, but I hope that was clear.
That was actually very insightful. I was very curious, and I'm going to check in with you later. I'm going to make a note on my calendar. I've never heard of softwares being used as lead magnets. At least,
Yeah.
maybe it's my limited worldview, but I've never seen that. I'm curious to see how that goes.
In a way, it's almost like free trials, right? Like some of the early stage, not early stage, some of the smaller products where you have like a 19 or a subscription price, your free trial is kind of a lead magnet where you have a free version that can do a subset of the problem really well. And then once you're in, then you get logged in, you get like, marketed to. So it is a version of that. The way that we want to do it differently is this is not being built by the engineering org, this is being built by the marketing org. So the marketing org will have a product team that is exclusively working on building these tools. So these tools are built for marketing. They're not built for product. But obviously they'll have the product sense, they'll have the right approach and all that. But then the core purpose of these tools is to drive leads. So see, again, why do we do content, right? We do content because we want to add value. So we feel like for some, even if you look at SEO, for some cases, maybe a tool is the answer. The answer is not writing a 10-page blog post. A tool is the answer where they can just go and give it some input and get an output.
That's true. I think that's very true. And please do share about your observations and your experiences, using these.
Yeah, my next 2 years in LinkedIn is all going to be about how to use AI in marketing. So I've already kind of decided my theme, like the personal brand theme for me for the next couple of years. And I'm glad that I so-called launched it in your podcast.
Nice. This was like a soft launch then.
Yeah, this is soft launch of the podcast.
Yeah, I think as marketers, like we any which ways have a very high appetite towards trying out new things and new tools.
Yeah.
Like it's a part and parcel of our life. And I realized this that I was doing myself and my audience a great disservice by not asking this question. Like, how are existing marketing teams incorporating AI in their workflows? Because I think it's very insightful way. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have not thought about lead magnets in this way, or about maybe the content creation in this way. Like, it always depends on the quality of input you put in, right? And that's what
there is also there's always a bias, right? Which I hate. Like it's almost it's like garbage in, garbage out. If you go to ChatGPT and you write write a blog post on SaaS tools, it's obviously going to give you something that you hate, and then you can't use that to say that hey, ChatGPT writes rubbish content. Obviously, it's going to write rubbish content. I think there is a nuance in learning how to prompt well, and not at level of prompt engineering. There are videos that you could watch. There are like Ben's Bytes is a great website where you go look at guides on how to prompt ChatGPT well for this specific use case. I think it is still extremely hard to get a good output from ChatGPT, so you have to put in that work. But then once you figure it out, the advantage there is it's repeatable. Like once you get a good output for one blog post, you just have to change the input, and then you're going to get a similar level of output for the next, and then you can just repeat it. So that is where I feel a lot of marketers are missing out, where they are not spending enough, they're not putting in enough reps in trying out these different things, trying out different keywords, trying out different prompts, trying out different styles. So I think that's a bias that marketers have to get over. And second part is some of these companies, like executives don't buy into it, right? Like executives have a bias against AI written content. Again, thanks to Jay, he is extremely supportive of using AI. He gets it. He understands AI natively. But then let's say if your boss doesn't get it, they're going to be like, hey, you can't use AI to write content. Google is going to ban you. But in reality, even Google can't figure out if it's AI or not. None of these AI detection tools work. They're going to flag, if you use Delve in your writing, it's going to flag your writing as AI written. So it's a very interesting and a very dynamic time that we live in. I think it's important to adapt very quickly. And what right now is outdated 1 month later. So it's just important to kind of, stay afloat and just look around what's happening, than form opinions and stick to those opinions for months. I will drop opinions if I'm proven wrong in a way. But right now, my opinions keep changing every 2 weeks. For example, I used to think that, okay, no code tools suck. But then AI coding tools are actually the best evolution of no code tools. It is no code, but then in a very coding way. So it's I just keep changing my opinions because things around us keep changing a lot.
And that makes sense. You know what? The guest note that you got, AI written.
Yeah, I mean, and I was looking for that, right? So yeah,
It took me quite a bit of time to get to a place wherein it was giving me the right kind of responses.
So you threw in the transcript and then it was able to get in the...
Yeah, so I threw in the transcript and I make my own notes whenever I'm doing the interviews. So it's not simply related to that. And even the first response I get, it's kind of like, I would say 80% I'm happy with it, but I want it to be even better. So then I'll feed it.
Yeah.
I'll fine tune it. I'll tweak the responses and I'll do like a little bit of playing around. But if I were to sit and write that entire thing myself, I can do it. It's not a problem, but it's just going to take a lot longer.
Yeah, so I'll tell you one more place that we use AI, right? So every meeting that we have in Stitchflow, we record it. So we use Otter. Everyone has a subscription, so we record it. So imagine this. We are chatting with our head of ops, head of CS about a case study. We get all the information from him. We have a transcript. We have the existing case study. Just throw all of that into Claude and then you get like a workable case study in like 5 minutes. And then it's like 80% there. Then you spend your time and it's like you can get it to 100%. So these are things that are not like, it's like, imagine I can't go into like a 2000 member org with my phone on saying that I want to record this, right? It's going to be weird. If there is no executive buy-in, if there is no buy-in from the entire room, right now when we started, it's just like I started this habit when we were like just 3 members. Obviously, the habit scaled. So now I don't look like a fool when I walk around with my phone. Like, in fact, I was planning to take this Hollyland mic and just walk around with that, so that because we discuss so many important things, and let's be honest, right? They're not going to remember it. So, but then AI is really good at synthesizing that information. So why not use it? Like, use it and use that to recreate content. So yeah, again, just reminded me of another way that we use AI.
No, that's very true. You know what? So I use Fireflies as my note taker. And one thing I've realized is Fireflies gives me like the summary of the call, and they do a fantastic job of, summarizing it. And my episode descriptions to some extent can come from it. Like I have done that in the past wherein it made such beautiful points and it captured the whole essence so beautifully. Like, yeah, I use it as a transcription tool as well. My final episodes which get uploaded. So any which ways I get like a summary of it. But it's done so.
Yeah, and one more thing, Mita, is that all these tools are getting so much better that let's say if you get into the habit of using AI tools, it's only a matter of time before the base model itself gets upgraded. That without you doing anything else, you're automatically going to get a better result. So, but then it's important to get into the habit. So the harder thing about using AI is not the tool itself, but your mindset of actually using it.
Yeah. It has to become like a part of your life, like Google Docs integrated in life. It's that kind of a thing. This was like an extremely fascinating section, and I think we could have like one entire conversation on this.
Yeah,
that interesting.
Yeah, maybe once I'm done enough with Stitchflow, marketing using AI, let's have a deep dive into that, and I'll obviously be happy to even like talk you through real examples and maybe even share my screen and show what you have done. So I think that'll be insightful.
Oh, lovely! That would be absolutely great. I think a lot of people do struggle to some extent. Figuring out where do they start. I had a very interesting conversation yesterday with another prospective guest, and she was telling me that they are huge fans of AI and they practically use a lot of it in their workflows as well. So I'm also she's going to go a little deeper when we chat next.
Nice.
But it's heartening. It's really heartening to see this. Okay, next. And this is like the final section of the conversation. And so there are a few things I realized when we had our first conversation, that there were like a few underlying things which have been like the basis of your career or the bedrock of your career, so to speak. One of them has been, it came forth in our last conversation. You called yourself like a very impulsive decision maker. But then you said that, there is this thing that you do wherein you balance your gut feelings along with research and knowledge. And you called it like a trainable gut. And that's something that you have been using whenever it comes to your own decision making. So even though it's impulsive, there is like a logic to it. There is like a science to it. Would love to hear a little more about it. And, how is it that you are using it to this day?
Okay. See, the thesis behind, again, obviously, like now I'm able to talk about this, but this all was just in habit. See, the thesis behind this is we waste a lot of time and thinking and talking about things because most of the decisions that we make are actually reversible and low impact. So one thing that I've done kind of intuitively is that I break down big decisions into small reversible decisions that I can take without any impact. I don't know, maybe let's say coming on this podcast is a big decision, but then getting on the initial call with you for 30 minutes is not. It's not a huge commitment. So I can still do that and then decide if I want to do the podcast or not. So that I think was, and when I talk to people where I find out this is not common thinking, where when they think of a decision, for example, right now I'm exploring, studying an online master's, huge decision, but then researching about it, watching a YouTube video, talking about an online master's is not. I can do that. So it is not overwhelming when you break down big decisions into small reversible decisions that has no impact. So that way and I think my gut is trained in a way that when I look at something, I can instantly figure out if it is going to have an impact. If there is no impact, then it's just a matter of should I do it or not. What I actively avoid is spending time thinking about or talking over a decision because I just genuinely feel that it is not going to add any value. Like if I impulsively take a decision and then I spend 2 days thinking about it, I don't see it changing a lot. So why do I want to hold on to something for 2 days? So that is one part on the decision making. In terms of the trainable gut, right? So I feel gut is a combination of the knowledge that you consume and the experience that you have. So that's why when when you're early on, your gut is not trustable because it's not trained enough to make the right decisions. But then for me, I spend a lot of time talking to people. I spend a lot of time consuming content, reading books, watching YouTube videos, just listening to TED or being on podcasts, talking to people like you. So I've constantly exposed myself to multitude of things that I trust my gut. Even though I can't always factually, logically back it, but I trust my gut that when for example, when let's say you reached out and then I said, okay, I don't have 1 hour right now, should we do this? So there are two things I could have done. I could have said, okay, you know what, let's not do the podcast because it's not worth my time. Or, okay, I don't have the time for it right now, but then, this seems to be a podcast that I should be on. Let's figure out a way to do it. So that was a gut decision. I did not spend time thinking about going to your LinkedIn profile or going to your YouTube to figure out. By just the interaction, I was able to figure out the quality of the podcast that this is going to be. I was able to make a decision. That is because I've been on 20 podcasts before this. So when I know that someone reaches out with this level of detail, I know the effort that they're going to put into the final episode. So I really want to be there. So I think these kind of things will come with experience. So that's a trainable gut part of it. So yeah, my kind of biggest lesson there, especially in context of let's say B2B SaaS or marketing, is that hey, most of what you do is going to be reversible. So just don't spend a lot of time thinking about this or coming up with pros and cons, putting this over some 2x2 matrix. It's not going to make a big difference. Just break it down into small reversible decisions that have minimal impact. So even if you screw up, you can just reverse it and course correct on the way.
That was, I think I needed to hear that as well. I needed to. But I think that's a great way of making decisions. Rather not sweat it. Most of the things you can go back and you can change things. So I think that's a great model, so to speak, of making decisions. Definitely.
Yeah.
Second thing that I realized looking at your career was you've built a lot of optionality in your career. Be it through your work as humor consultant, be it as your micro-SaaS work that you do with Supermeme, along with your full-time role. So there is a lot of optionality you've built in your career. And I think that's extremely important, especially for marketers. Any which ways, first ones on the chopping block. I think I say this every episode, but does not change that fact because I think we just hear of too many layoffs and marketers being the first ones, unfortunately. But how is it that, building this optionality works? I know that this has been a very gradual, organic sort of a journey for you, but how does one bring it in their career? And what would you say are some very good things that have come out of this optionality? You may have answered this question earlier, but still.
No, I think this is there's an important question, and it is driven from one of my core values, which is freedom. So I value freedom over anything. And the way to freedom for me is obviously like having multiple paths. Like, see, right now I'm extremely comfortable being in this role at Stitchflow, knowing that I can walk away anytime and go back to getting $1,500 a month with Supermeme. So that option is there. And I think that's important to me because I want the option to walk away. Because I've been in situations where I've been stuck at jobs because I didn't have anything else to do and I didn't have a source of income. So a learning for me was that if you want to pursue things that you want to do in your life, you need to have the financial kind of freedom to do that. And the way that you get that is by having multiple sources of income. That is just again, it sounds obvious when I say it, but then most people in 9-to-5 jobs don't realize it. And right now, and like you said, right, be it layoffs or be it marketers, see, as long as you're on a 9-to-5 job, it poses almost the same level of risk, if not slightly more than running your own business. And when I say it, it might sound naive, but then I say it and I really mean it, because especially if your company is big enough, you don't control when your job goes for a toss. And I don't mean to say that you're going to get laid off, but even a role change. Maybe they ask you to do things that you don't like doing. Maybe they ask you to report under someone that you don't like working with. So all those are risks that you have to mitigate. And then the way to do that is by creating other sources of income. And it doesn't have to come from micro-SaaS. It doesn't have to come from selling an online course. It can even come from, let's say, running an offline business. Like my wife works with Microsoft, but then she also has her own custom business. Amazing. Like that's her passion. She likes doing it. She gets source of income from it. But overall, I feel to get freedom, to have the ability to walk away from things that you don't like doing, you need to have other things to bank on. So when I left SuperOps, I had Supermeme, even though it was only paying me like $500, I still had that. So it gave me a grounding to take my time to find the next role. So I was able to survive 1.5 years with just consulting and Supermeme, knowing that until the right opportunity comes, I don't have to rush into it. So what happens when you don't have optionality is that you scramble and you tend to take whatever comes your way. So, and that's also the reason why I don't have a housing loan. That's also the reason why I don't drive an expensive car, even though I can afford it. So all the spends that you make reduce your optionality and reduce your freedom. So I've actively tried to stay away from loans. I've actively tried to not get into big financial commitments, because you don't know how things are going to change. So it's always good to have a life where you can scale it down as quickly as you can scale it up. So that's kind of the principle that I operate. So it comes from my core value of just wanting to be free.
I think this is more like a philosophy for life in general as well. Like the fewer things you can work with, you're always going to be happier. I mean, yes, if you want, you can go ahead and buy something, you can treat yourself. But it's always like a good rule of thumb to live with a little less.
Yeah.
But I really like the way in which you actually brought out the risks of even having like a 9-to-5.
Yeah, it is risky, and I don't understand how we got associated with 9-to-5 safe, business not safe, because I see it as the opposite. Right? At least in Supermeme, we have 350 people paying us $5,000. So the chances of all 350 not paying us the amount is extremely low, versus like one person making a decision to take me out of my job is extremely high. So it is risky in the way that we see it, right? Like businesses are not risky if you choose the right business. So it's not a abstract statement. There is risk in both ways, but it totally depends on how you try. And if you work in a tech company, if you work in marketing, sales role, forget it, any role, right? You have to assume some sort of risk. Like it's just the way that it is. I mean, if you ignore that, everything that's been happening around us, then we're just stupid, right? If we don't assume that risk.
That's true. I mean, there are things which are going to be out of our control, can't be helped. Yeah, I think that's very true. But yeah, I think more people, and not just marketers, but more of us need to bake in a little more optionality in our life. Because it just gives you the freedom to go and build the kind of life that you want to live. And it could also...
Yeah, I think it comes down to that, right? It comes down to not being... See, career is part of your life. And if you go ask a lot of people, they don't truly enjoy their jobs, because they always thought that, okay, let me go work for 20 years and then then I will go do what I want to do. But it somehow never comes. And I think that's why it is important for companies also to be open to having employees do something that they want. And I think obviously see that a lot happening these days in modern companies, where if you have a side project and if you want to take a day off to just go support, then you should be allowed to do that. But it is also equally important for people and employees start thinking in a way that, hey, it's okay for me to go do something on the side. I think there is somehow we've associated guilt with all of this. Right? I don't know where that happened. I was also like that, where if I do something on my own while being in a full-time job, it feels like I'm doing something wrong. It's not true. Like, as long as you're not doing anything that violates your contract with that company, you're completely fine.
That's very true. I think it just comes down to the fact that you're supposed to have just one means of employment at a time. I think it boils down to that.
Yeah.
It's just, that's the kind of truth that we have grown up with. And maybe we are finding it difficult to challenge or put it out of our minds. But then the kind of situation or the kind of circumstances our parents worked in was very different. Now,
it's very government jobs, as stable as it can get. And there is not a lot of dynamism that, you will not hear layoffs unless you really screwed up, you didn't get fired. So yeah, you just have to accept the fact that we have to adapt our mindset to the changing times.
Good. That's actually true. My next question is around building a very sound online presence and a personal brand. And you've done a fantastic, job at that. It's very authentic. It's very relatable. And everyone right now wants to build a personal brand. I mean, you see a lot of personal brand.
Yeah, that's that's a problem, right?
The funniest thing, my Instagram feed is littered with sponsored ads of personal profiles. I think that's one trend that I've started seeing right now.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but for some reason, it's a bunch of personal profiles popping up doing sponsored ads. The funniest one I saw had a guy riding a horse on the beach and doing very angsty paintings with very weird music playing.
You sure it's not AI generated?
It's an Indian guy. I can even tell you the name of the company because I was like,
no, I'm not active on Instagram, so I wouldn't know.
I was like, what is happening? It's so chaotic and it's so I don't know. It gave me very teenage girl vibes. I'm sorry to say that, but it did. Anywho, the point is, a lot of people are very keen on building personal brand, and I see people doubling down on that. And this whole sponsored ads is just an indication that people are paying money to grab eyeballs right now. It's just an indicator of that. So, what are some of the things that you would share from your experience as to how do you express yourself online very authentically, very relatably, and create a very good presence for yourself, because you've done a fantastic one at that, and it's very non-cringe. I'm sorry to say that, but I think that's important too.
Thank you so much. See, and I've always said this, right? Personal brand to me has never been a goal, even though I've kind of now actively trying to work on it as a goal, but even it's not working for me. The time it actually worked for me is when I just did it without thinking. And I think I see building a personal brand on the internet very similar to how you do it in person. Right? So imagine you walk into a room, like at a social gathering. Like, imagine the kind of people who pull the crowd, right? They have something interesting to say. They are either entertaining, they share an interesting story. They give you a unique insight that you can't hear from anyone else. So right now, and this is how it's worked for a while, where only when people have something valuable to share do they get to build a brand around them. For example, for me, it so happened that I was able to share things in a funny way that people weren't using humor for. I was able to use, let's say, product management, product marketing, B2B SaaS in funny context that people found interesting. I was using, in a Twitter context, I was using Tamil memes in a B2B SaaS context that people found funny. So I was able to do that, and that is my unique kind of attraction point of building a personal brand. And that is extremely authentic. That is authentic because it's also the content where I wanted to share, and I did it without the intent of building a personal brand. So what I see happening right now is that you can very clearly see that their goal is to increase. And again, when I was doing all of this, I was happy seeing my follower growth grow, but then that was never the goal. Again, I don't say this to sound like, extremely like a high humility or anything like that, but it is just not something that I knew I could control. So hence it is never part of my goal. But right now what I see is a lot of gaming the system. For example, I don't post every day because I don't have anything valuable to say every day. So I don't post every day. But I see a lot of people like trying to game the system by posting every day, trying to write in formats that work well with the algorithm and all that. So again, nothing against it. Maybe it works. And I know people who have made it big with that also. So for me, the way that I would build personal brand is just by sharing things. And again, the example that I would use is do it like the way that you would do it in person. If you go into a social gathering, what are some of the things that you would do or say that will pull people towards you? The same thing that you should be doing on the internet as well. And just maybe if you want to do something different, just apply that rubric, right? If I do this in person, what would happen? Like that's how I think about it. It is very, very similar to how you do it in person and how you form like a personal brand. Because the internet, the only thing it did is it exposed and it opened up the entire world that anyone can now listen to you and resonate with your ideas. So you should use it like that. It's your thoughts and your ideas and your opinions and your perspectives that you're sharing that pull people towards you. So it is that builds the personal brand, and everything else is a second layer. Yeah, you can use memes, you can use videos, you can use reels, like so many things you can do, but it should be grounded in what you truly want to say, and what you want to say should be valid.
That makes sense. And I think it's very important to always remember that there is a human at the other side of the screen. Even at the end of the day, if you're not really meeting them, but it's going to be, you're trying to have a conversation, right? Sharing of ideas, it's that. So like the analogy you mentioned, imagine you saying this to people in front of you when you're entering a room. So I think that's a very good filter to have. I never thought of things that way, but I think this is a very good filter to keep in mind when drafting, writing content. Because are we trying to make it more conversational? Are we trying to make it more relatable? Are we expressing it in a way that people understand what we are trying to say? It's not even.
I'm thinking, imagine if you go into a room and you start shouting, saying that, hey, I was walking down the road and I found like a person wearing suit and walking to an interview, like stuff that we see on LinkedIn, right? See, it is good in a way that it grabs attention, but then beyond a point, you know that that's the only thing it does. Like the value is not there. But how would you actually do it, right? If you really want to share a story, you would go start it on. You won't just start with the story. You will try to make a connection. You will try to just set some context. So I think I see some of that as authentic. Like I really see that when you share on the internet, just be raw. It doesn't have to be chiseled to the exact word. Just share as if you would just talk to a friend.
No, makes sense. And that's the best kind of advice to give. Remember the other human on the side.
Well,
great. I'm on the final two questions. One would be, what is the career advice that you would have for marketers aspiring and experienced based off your experiences? And then my final one would be closing thoughts and reflections on your career.
Awesome. So for aspiring marketers, I think I would just say understand your audience, that they come above everything else. And very tactically, if let's say you have the luxury, spend the first month in pre-sales demos and customer support calls. That's the best place to understand your customers. That's very tactically do that. And understand the audience and make sure that whatever that you're writing, see, marketing, as much as it gets associated with the creative role, is not a creative role. It is a very strategic role that you're there to serve a purpose. So you could be the excellent writer out there, but then if your audience prefer a more toned down way of writing, that's what you should be doing. You can go do your creative writing on your own, but then as a marketer, your job is not to show your creativity, but then to create stuff that brings in people, that serves a purpose. It could be lead generation, it could be thought leadership, it could be brand or whatever, but just apply that lens and don't get your creativity, carry you away. That is for the aspiring marketers, because I see a lot of young people associate marketing with creativity, but obviously it's creativity, but then the job is not that. The job is much more than that. For experienced marketers, I actually would highlight the fact that don't ignore AI, especially in marketing, right? There is a lot that it can give you. So don't ignore it, because I see this risk with experienced marketers quickly dismissing AI as just a fad or just a hype. It might be too late if you don't take attention right now, that it just gets embedded in your workflow and you don't even notice it. So definitely don't ignore AI. Just keep up with trends of what's happening and try to see if you can use AI to make your job better, because I think marketing is definitely going to be impacted with AI, and it's just good to be on top of that. So that's what I would say. And closing thoughts on my career. Wow, that's a deep question, but I think I've kind of talked about my career enough that I have a sense of what I want to say. I think my career has been defined by impulsive decisions and also extremely structured and processed approaches, right? Again, I'll say this as an example. So I believe I am a proud generalist, but then I'm not a generalist because I can do so many things. I'm a generalist because I've done one thing specifically for a short period of time before moving on. So in my 10, 12 years of working, I've always gone deep in areas. Like 2 years, I went deep into customer support. 2 years, I went deep into pre-sales. 2 years, I went deep into product marketing, into product management, into entrepreneurship, into micro-SaaS. And at some point, I went deep into coding. So it is important to go deep in multiple areas. So I see that as a huge strength, because my nature is to be broad. In the outside, it might look like, hey, this guy's done multiple things. Like, is he not an expert in anything? But then I have been an expert in short periods. So that's where I get my expertise from. And the second part is always aspiring to be 1 or 2 levels above, my current level. I applied to speak at conferences when I was barely 5 years into it. And when I was at a certain level at one of the companies I worked for, I fought with my manager saying I should be 2 levels above, saying that this is your matrix for that level, which was obviously way above my pay grade. But then I said, no, I belong there. And then they ended up giving me 1 level below, which I was happy to take. But then I'm saying I'm constantly looking at ways where I can operate at 2-3 levels above where I am currently at. Because see, even now with Stitchflow, my goal, which I communicated to Jay, was that, hey, I want to learn how to do your job. I want to learn how to be a CEO of a Valley company. That's where I want to be. And it's important to be explicit about that with people that you're working with, and then be explicit about your goals with yourself as well as people that you're working with, so that they know. And so far, whatever that I've been explicit about, I've kind of managed to get there. So that way, it worked out well. And the third thing is, some of them was serendipity, but then serendipity in a way that happened because I was putting myself out there. Even on, let's say, be it on social media, even within Freshworks, right? So there was this internal social networking tool called Workplace by Facebook. They shut down the product, but then that used to be the product where we share internal ideas. It was almost like an internal social media tool. I was extremely active there, and that actually led to a lot of people notice me even before I worked with them. So I have kind of created opportunities, and that's how we met Ramshri, being on LinkedIn. That's how I met Jay, by just being active on LinkedIn. So that's how it led me to my current job. So everything that happened in my career happened because I was putting myself out publicly and sharing my views publicly in a way that people, when they thought of an opportunity, they remembered me because I was constantly in their faces. I was constantly trying to do something, trying to say something. So I think that those would be my reflections.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev, for those wonderful reflections on your career. They were extremely poignant. Not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but poignant to hear and also to understand. I think there are so many things from your career journey that would be so invaluable to the listeners and to anyone who's going to, have the pleasure of hearing about your story and your life. Even when I first went through your profile, I was like, this guy is a generalist in the true sense of the, term. And I think that's the way you've basically been honing yourself to lead the company. I think that's the kind of journey that you've had, and it definitely shows. Thank you so very much for coming on the show, for spending so much time. I loved our conversation. There were so many things that, I take away from this conversation myself. And I can't wait for this to be out next year. It's going to be a fun one. People are going to love it. And this is going to be an inspiration for anyone who wants to do their own journey, is wondering how. This is going to tell them how.